And if there's one thing that I've seen that drives people towards building their own inference, clusters and running their own private models, et cetera, it's around data.
Don't forget, there's an AI networking summit coming up, and you're invited. So go to the onug.net website to get your tickets now. So, and also, if you're on YouTube or Spotify or any of the places where this podcast is being broadcast or streamed, make sure that you hit like or subscribe to it. Thanks. Todd Nightingale, welcome.
How's it going? So glad
It's
to be
going
here.
awesome. Great. Thanks, Todd. Todd, I love your last name. I don't know why, but it has like this ring to it, Nightingale, and I just never forget it. It's like, go figure. Yeah.
It has a great nursing heritage, though no relation.
Yeah. Well, welcome. I'm really looking forward to like this chat, as Arista is like, one of the leaders in AI networking. And so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive in some of the topics that are important, I think, to the industry. But before we kind of dive into that, let's talk a little bit about you, in your journey and kind of what brought you to Arista. So I knew you a little bit when you were over at Cisco doing Meraki. But if you want to start a little bit before that and just give everybody, a sense of, kind of what your career journey was like and kind of what brought you now to like be the co-president over at Arista.
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. I guess professionally, I've really always been interested in networking. Right from grad school, I studied, TCP and networking protocol design, Q theory in school. And right from there, went into a silicon company building networking, Wi-Fi silicon, a very small startup. So I got some really interesting, startup experience. And from there, a network security company. So I saw the kind of security side of networking build outs as well as network management. That company was called Air Defense, and we sold that company to Motorola. So I actually got an interesting perspective on what a type of strategic acquisition looks like and how bringing that kind of technology into a larger organization sort of feels and how that impacts customers, most importantly. And from there, I joined Meraki, and Meraki was kind of, I think, the first really successful cloud managed networking portfolio.
Yeah.
And again, we went through an acquisition to Cisco, and I got to be got a real front row seat to that. I ran that company for 7 years, ran that organization within Cisco for about 7 years, and then 3 more years at Cisco, leading the enterprise business, the campus, data center, compute businesses for those guys, and got exposure at Cisco what that acquisition looks like, and then what the ultra scale, like high scale organization looks like. And I love my time at Cisco, to be clear. Yeah. But I left Cisco, and for the last 3 years, I got to do something a little bit different. Not strictly a networking company, although I found out that content delivery, CDN, is actually, for the most part, a networking technology. Yeah. And I led a company called Fastly, publicly traded organization doing an enormous amount of capacity on the internet, more than 200 terabits of traffic, and has enormous exposure across like very, very popular web assets, big publishers, big media, streaming, et cetera. And they had an exceedingly high demand for reliability, perhaps the highest I'd ever seen in the world. If your streaming service interrupts your child's cartoon for like 1 second, the world notices. And it was an incredibly reliable technology, and it was also incredibly secure and because of all the WAF, DDoS style functionality that Fastly sold. And I got to spend 3 years running that company. We ran it as 100% as an Arista infrastructure, networking infrastructure across more than 100 pops around the world.
Mm.
And it was just an enormously like important experience for me. Um, and so when I got that call from Arista, it was just I don't know, felt like coming home in so many ways. It's just
Yeah.
been enormously exciting. I'm getting close to being here for about a year, and yeah, I it feels like once again we're sort of reinventing the internet, building on the frontier, and that focus on how customers and users really depend on the network and on the internet and on the AI and the campus build outs that we're seeing. It's
Mm.
exciting. I've been doing internet. I've been building the internet my whole life, and I'll tell you, it's my passion. I feel like the
Yeah.
luckiest guy I know.
Yeah, I kind of share that excitement. I kind of feel lucky to have been in the industry at the time that I was, and had contributed so much to like its building of a resource, a global resource that, global economies are now built upon that we didn't envision, back in the, 90s, so that's a good journey. It's like one thing.
I try to explain this to family members of mine. I get questions about like my what I do for a
What do
living.
you do? Yeah.
My mom always wants to figure out what it is I do for a living.
Yeah.
And
Good mom.
yeah, she's excited about it. I'll tell you, like, there is something kind of special about building the network and building the internet. I don't think I'm the only one who believes this.
Mm.
Like, you are connecting people to things that matter. Like you're connecting
Yeah.
people to the news, to the entertainment, to their way they work, the way they connect to their family and communicate, and that the technology itself is so interesting and so compelling.
Mm.
There's this concept of open standards and driving not just standardization but the industry momentum that it takes to build out. And building the internet is like, I don't know, it's an amazing gift because everyone gets to see the impact of it. So I've
Yeah.
always been excited about it, and I still am.
It's like how I decided to like, so since we're sharing kind of like internet stories and like in kind of career stories. So I decided to like get into networking when I was kind of a junior in college. So I went out the night before and had way too many drinks. And I and I woke up, kind of hungover. And then for some reason, I was kind of getting down on myself. I was like, oh, okay, I really got to figure out what I got to do with my life. And there was a Time magazine that was like on the coffee counter, and so I picked it up, and there was a big headline that says "A New Era in Telecommunications." All right, I just dated myself. That was 1984, the breakup of the Bell system, and I'm like, huh, I should get into networking, and
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
like it.
sparked my interest in fiber optics, and really just like all the cool technologies were kind of like in networking in the late 80s, and then or mid 80s, mid to late 80s, and then it really came into fruition in the 90s. But you're right, I share that passion, about we're not just connecting devices, we're really connecting people, we're connecting countries, together, and beautiful things happen when people are networked together. So I share that. So it's really nice to hear that, from an executive
Yeah.
as well, where it's not just it's there's a bigger cause to this. So,
But
but I want to.
we're seeing it in the recruiting as well right now at Arista. I mean, in some ways, like it's never been more exciting to be in networking than right now. Cycles that used to take 5 years, like to go from 10 megabit to 100 megabit to a gigabit, those were like 5-7 year cycles. Now we're seeing
Yeah.
cycles that are lasting 12 or 18 months to go from 400 megabit to 800 to 1.6T. I mean, the speed of
Yeah.
innovation, I don't, 5 years ago, I never would have imagined it, but the speed of innovation in this space is just remarkable right now. I mean, so it's like in a lot of ways, it's never been more exciting to be in networking than right now. I don't know. It's an awesome.
Actually, a really good
it's an awesome
point,
time.
because like I was kind of something came through my email about 1.6T. I'm like, we were just talking about 800, G, a little while ago, and I'm like, what happened to that product life cycle? That
Yeah.
just got compressed, like so quickly, So yeah, and I didn't dawn on me until you really just said that. How
I saw a note the other day on 3.2, so
yeah.
you're already deprecated, man. You're
There
already
we go.
deprecated.
Yeah. Well, the only good thing that we can bet on, it's always a factor of two. That we're increasing.
I don't know. Something changed. It used to be factors of 10.
10,
Like
right?
back
Yeah.
in the campus, we went from 10 to
Yeah.
100 to 1,000. Now we're
Yeah.
on 400 to 800 to 1.6. There
Yeah.
was a somehow the leap to the cloud or the data center like changed the model there.
That's right. So, all right. So, one thing that you said is like sticking with me, and that's your Meraki experience. So, it's like, and within Cisco too, because Cisco acquired so many companies during John Chambers' reign, and some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Meraki really worked out. That was what a huge success story. Within Cisco, for it to, really grow from kind of a novice idea of being able to do Wi-Fi kind of as a service, into like that model of procurement and management, for all of the networking infrastructure. And that business just really grew. So congrats, for kind of driving that. You don't see that with many companies, that they've acquired. There's a few, but you're in that elite group. So congrats on that.
I'm not alone at Arista. Jay
Oh, Jay
Shree was
Sharif.
part of
Yeah.
the Crescendo
Yeah.
acquisition. And as successful as I'm proud that Meraki was, like Crescendo was more successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think John Chambers had a vision in so many ways of how the internet and how networking would evolve, and he made some of the most strategic acquisitions of all time.
Yeah.
And I think those are two good examples for sure.
Yeah, we had John present at the networking summit, the AI networking summit in spring last year. And I'll tell you, he is, he's not an old gentleman, but he is sharp as a tack. It's so hard because I was doing a fireside chat with him. It's like the synapses were firing so fast in my head just to keep up with him. It's like I had a set of questions I wanted to talk to him about, and like John is like blowing that away, and it's like that was the most challenging discussion I ever had live in front of an audience before.
I have no idea how old he is, but I will tell you he's ageless. I've seen him. I've seen that exact same thing. It's remarkable how he synthesizes information. You should try presenting like a QBR to him.
Is that like a 2-week prep?
Yeah, I mean, it's emotional. It's an emotional prep.
Yeah. All right. So now you're co-president at Arista. So what does that mean? What's your role, kind of responsibility? And also you're co-president with Ken Duda. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
It's an interesting experience for me. It's the first time I've haven't had responsibility for engineering. I started my career as an engineer. I led engineering teams sort of my whole career, and it's the first role like that. And so that's interesting. I was a little worried joining Arista that might feel somehow awkward to me, and I'd have to be careful. The overwhelming feeling I had was I was humbled by it, like to see the way that the engineering team under Ken's leadership drives this like fundamental focus on quality is remarkable, and it made the transition like super easy for me, to be honest. And
nice.
That's largely how we split up the responsibility. So Ken owns the engineering teams, hardware and software, and sort of the innovation engine at Arista. He's the founder, along with Andy Bechtolsheim, and they continue, the two of them continue to drive what is really the next generation of networking, not just at Arista, but I think across the industry. And you see that in the standards community and the size of the big deployments. I look after our field and sales teams, product management. So I still have some engagement with the roadmap, which is nice, for sure. I look after the marketing team, manufacturing, supply chain, operations, customer support and services, and largely the customer facing
Yeah.
organization, top to bottom, and the operations and manufacturing behind that. And then Jay Shree, along with our CFO, looks after like finance and HR and the core business function.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, yeah, great split. Great split there, and also it's it's kind of unique, where with Andy and also Ken staying so involved, in the company from its founding, till now, so that's unique, and that's a real strategic, strength. Actually, Andy presented at the last AI networking summit, and he was he was really great, so relaxed, and he was a rock star. It's like we were supposed to, like, he was coming on the podcast, and so after like his talk, and I'm hanging out there with Chris Schmidt, and it's like there's a group of people that just will not let him go. They're taking photos with him. It's like they want him to like sign their hats. It's like like, wow, how cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, he if there is a tech celebrity, certainly falls into that category. I once
Yeah.
had a breakfast meeting with him, and recommended we meet at like a random breakfast spot that I like, next, kind of near the conference he was presenting at later that day, and that was a mistake. Where like half of the place just
Uh,
stared at us the whole time.
uh,
So yeah, he carries that celebrity. But I'll tell you, I almost never seen someone so engaged. He just presented at our customer conference here last week at headquarters.
yeah.
He's pushing the innovation, especially like
Mm,
across the AI build out right now, and down to the bits and the bytes, down to the like
mm,
cooling design for like the
yeah.
next generation of optics and XPO, which Arista is sort of leading the charge on standardization and driving sort of new technology, new capacity, and how optics work. Uh, he's not just engaged. I mean, he is
Yeah.
pushing and driving the strategy of the company forward. It's awesome.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So actually, let's use that to pivot. So industry wise, so we focus mostly on the large enterprise, not so much the hyperscalers, but only as the hyperscalers as a supplier in the supply chain of large enterprise IT ecosystems. So, if we have to talk mostly about AI and AI infrastructure. So, are you seeing? There seems to be a real, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of attention um, between buy and sell right now in the large enterprise. Do you base your AI strategy on token consumption, which means that you're basically buying AI services, and you're moving your workloads into whether those are clouds or whether those are the public facing AI models, or suppliers, or do you build your own infrastructure? And so then you really focus on transformation. And I think the problem that we're seeing, it'd be interesting to kind of compare notes here, is that on the build side of it, there's a lot of headwinds, right? And that has to do, there's skilled staff, that they don't have. There is cost of GPUs and that infrastructure. There's also such a quick pace associated with innovation there. So there's always a concern of obsolescence. So if what I buy now, will I have to depreciate that? Accelerate the depreciation, of it. Will I get the full value, of that? Um, Data center size, power requirements. So there's all those headwinds. And I think those headwinds push them towards consumption, into more of a buy than a build mode. But what's slowing that down too, there's many companies that basically they're restricted from using public LLMs because of IP leakage, right, and sensitive data. And so now there's a discussion. Maybe there's a hybrid model where you start to think about different LLMs doing different. So you segment based upon tasks. all right, and then maybe you do open source models internally, and so that you kind of reduce your token consumption, you reduce the exposure footprint of IP leakage. So anyway, so there's the build versus buy question around AI infrastructure, and that is going to shift and change over time based upon how technology evolves, security evolves, so forth. So anyway, didn't mean to kind of dominate that whole little discussion there. So sorry about that, but but
I,
that's the thinking. So what are you saying?
yeah, I can give you my 2 cents on it. I mean, the I think there is a build versus buy conversation here. I'm not sure it's buy versus sell. I think it's build versus buy, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that everyone has a framework to make that kind of decision. I think is valuable right now because things are changing so quickly, and in some ways, the like rules of the road that we have been accustomed to for the last decade or something are maybe not all 100% valid. Um, when I look at sort of organizations that are trying to find ways to use AI to make all of their teams more efficient, I I largely see, I think, the smartest, most sophisticated organizations, and a lot of times the organizations you think would be so sophisticated they would be able to build on their own, no problem,
Yeah.
and they could pursue that well. They're focusing on buy model, like a token, like you said, like a token purchasing sort of
Yeah.
model. And the reason is there are good options for getting a private instance, building the right kinds of security around that. And I'm sure the best practices there will evolve and change over time. How segmented you can get that model depends on the vendor you use, et cetera. But an enormous amount of the value um, in that type of agent that's going to be assisting your workforce and driving not just efficiency but perhaps far more work output and capacity and ever is how the models are sort of wired to your business. And that was, I think, in a lot of ways the kind of shift towards an agentic model here, which is, you know,
Mm.
if you have good, frontier or high level models, high level LLMs that are running efficiently, the biggest difference between whether they are, helpful or enormously game changingly helpful is how well they have access to the right data and data in a format that they can consume,
Yeah.
and how well they're wired into the tools that they need so they can run queries and take actions. And that is a lot of work. That's like, that's kind of really building the foundation of how these things can change the game in so many ways. And it's building it and it's wiring those agents. And there's a lot of work to that and has enormous impact. And maybe, you I think a lot of people are realizing, let's figure all of that out. Let's see all the areas where this can really change our business and make a difference
Yeah.
before we go down the journey of trying to build out hardware infrastructure and um, uh, you know kind of lock ourselves into one generation and have to deal with all of the hardware deprecation, et cetera, issues that you have that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Maybe that really is what's kind of going on. Is that um, it's not so much kind of like trying to figure out which models to use because you're going to use a range of them, but it's really more about you know workflow data that you need. How do you connect these kind of groups and or these people together within that workflow? How do you make that better? How do you transform your business? And we spend a lot of time talking about LLMs and talking about agents and so forth, where they are kind of a means to an end. And that means those technologies are somewhere the means. The end is really just high productivity, better customer service, more competitive business, being able to deliver a service that is far better than anyone else at a lower price point. It's like it's that whole
It,
race to value.
in the last 12-18 months, I think one thing, people who are really building this type of solution aggressively, organizations that are really leaping at the opportunity to make
Mm,
AI have a high impact on their business. One thing they're realizing is like, oh yeah, you don't pick a model,
mm,
you build a framework in which you'll be constantly able to upgrade the model and shift the model. And you don't even want to be able, you don't
mm,
even want to focus on one sort of family. You want to be able to plug in the model that makes sense. And your example of, using one model for one type of query and a different for another, 100% is,
mm.
the lay of the land. And you might find that the model that your organization gets the most value from in software engineering has very little. It could be a completely different model that the sort of business intelligence and analytics groups prefer, and teams need to be ready for that. And I think that's correct.
Yeah,
That's the way we should be thinking about this. The next piece, though, and I think as soon as you start on this journey, you have to be thinking about data privacy and security.
mm,
It has to be the second half of every one of these conversations. And in this
yeah,
kind of token based model where you're connecting to maybe a private instance or some kind of secure agent, you need to be really methodical about
yeah,
how you secure your data, how you prevent data leakage, and not just prevent data leakage um, when every employee, every member of the team is operating 100% compliant, but how you detect when
mm,
someone is accidentally using the wrong instance or accidentally, using the instance that they use at home or whatever. Like, there is real risk here because we're talking about
yeah.
connecting AI agents to data that is,
Sensitive.
part and parcel to the way our organizations drive our mission. Like,
Mm,
the security around that and how you build a private instance, how you build a private model, what you think about in terms of data exposure. We are just at the very beginning of
yeah,
people getting careful and getting serious about this. And if there's one thing that I've seen that drives people towards building their own inference, clusters and running their own private models, et cetera, it's around data. And I think, so be it. If your organization has data that cannot leave your own infrastructure, then that's the road. Then
yeah,
to me, that's the biggest reason people find themselves in a build situation right now
yeah,
in the traditional enterprise.
yeah,
The
yeah.
other reason people find themselves in the build world is like they're trying to teach cars to drive themselves, or trying to build an agent to troubleshoot computer networks from
Yeah,
scratch. And that, of course, that's a different world. But the bulk of the enterprise build, if it, data privacy, data security, that can tend to drive people towards the build side of the house for sure.
yeah, yeah. I'm totally with you. I think kind of the guidance that we're setting up for kind of the ONU community is that a couple of things that you mentioned. One is that you've got to be in this game. You can't be observing. You've got to be actually using all the tools. Um, you know, and obviously you can't just be using the tools on sensitive data, as well. But guardrails, need to be really put in place. And that's the responsibility of the infrastructure team. It's the infrastructure team, the network and security teams that need to put these guardrails in so that if you have a rogue agent, that you've got to figure out identity without a human kind of in the loop. You've got to be able to like mitigate when all of a sudden the data an agent is trying to like get into your PCI and get PII data, and send it to another agent. There's got to be these guardrails that are put in place. So the whole IP leakage piece is really important. But I think there's the experimentation that's happening right now is super important because it gets people to understand what is the art of the possible. But I do believe, and maybe this can shift us towards networking, that there's all of the products, the AI infrastructure products that have been released have been really geared towards one segment, and that's the kind of the large hyperscaler companies. And it's only the largest of in the enterprise. You mentioned, like, if you're building self-driving cars, if you're looking for a cure for cancer, if you're looking to mitigate, fraud in financial services, those institutions, have gone the build, process, but they're just at the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's like as the vendor community also starts to wrap its arms around this, around, okay, what kinds of products do we need to sell into the large enterprise to enable the build process to happen? So I think, it's like the dots I'm connecting from your discussion, Todd, is that experimentation going on today, familiar with the tools, understanding the workflows, how they may change, experimenting with kind of public AI services around that. Um, but I'm pretty convinced there will be a shift, over into private infrastructure. It's like,
I think it's inevitable, and we're already seeing the beginnings of the kind of hardware support for that. I don't want to cheapen the effort that people are kind of making in building out with public models, building out private solutions. I think
yeah,
wiring up those tools and bringing the correct data and securing a private instance, etc. I think there's tons of yeah work and building going on there. But when we talk about building infrastructure, I think we're maybe next year, maybe even late this year, we're going to start to see a real shift here as
mm,
additional accelerators really become available, whether it's like Google TPU or the work that's coming out of AMD, which is amazing right now,
mm,
and maybe even has the potential to accelerate that more would be inference specific machines that are
yeah,
really designed specifically to run on the inference side. And I think a real there's so much innovation in this space. The barrier to entry is lowering,
yeah,
and that as that barrier comes down, then more people gain access to the ability to build privately, to be able to manage their data and their security more effectively, and to run at far better cost efficiency as well. So there's no doubt about it that the landscape is changing. I mean, seeing the momentum that these other vendors have, whether it's Google or AMD or the inference machine folks. I mean,
yeah,
it's coming soon. It's coming soon for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I thought like one out of like last week's NVIDIA conference, actually the one announcement that I thought was like really interesting was NemoClaw. So it's kind of taking OpenClaw, but putting enterprise controls around it. I thought that was like, so an agentic agent for the enterprise, marketplace. So I thought it's kind of, I think that's one example, of how I think things can get repackaged, for the enterprise marketplace. But anyway, so but I think so. Let's go into actually networking. So we know that traffic patterns have been changing. They're getting bigger. They're getting bulkier. Latency requirements are getting more stringent. Patterns are changing, and and there's got to be like when agentic does become safe and companies start to really deploy it, that's got to like just totally and fundamentally shift the way in which we expect networks to behave, like almost inverting it, especially if we have edge and inferences, like, if all of a sudden, like, Apple does come out with a kind of an inference machine on your phone, it's like, you know,
Be careful. I mean, there's real hardware on those new 17 series phones. Like, I mean, it's totally possible, and I think we'll be looking at a hybrid model with some on-device compute and some in the cloud. But yeah, I mean, I think AI is for sure shifting the way networks are built and managed in the campus. We look carefully at the traffic patterns changing and looking at like large bandwidth streams coming off of devices for inference models, and the need for data to be pushed into large data lakes and data storage, because there's now an ability to consume it using AI
yeah,
models that we never had before. So it's exploding the amount of data. The attack vectors are changing. We've seen now quite a few examples of AI agents pursuing network attacks, and we need to be very, very mindful of how that is shifting the way networks need to be protected. We need to be looking at all the attack surfaces and really understanding that we should be expecting high volume attacks, because AI is changing the way adversaries interact with the network as well.
mm,
And then I think we shouldn't forget the opportunity that is in front of us. AI agents can help us build, manage, monitor, secure networks in ways, I don't know, 3 years ago, I never would have thought possible. At
Mm.
Arista, Ava is our
Yeah.
network management agent, our AI ops agent, and the power that of this thing is remarkable. The ability, because it's been wired so well into a unified data layer that's looking across the data center, the cloud, the campus, et cetera, because it has access to the tools. What it can do is remarkable, and
Yeah.
I think again we're even just starting on that journey. So there's no doubt AI is changing the network.
Well, I think so. So let's start to shift around operations, and lifecycle management. So you're right. Like Ava is a great product. I've seen it, in action, and so you can actually now interact and talk with your infrastructure, and that's a huge change in CLI commands, and kind of
Yeah,
managing it. So we have now kind of an ability to interact, with the infrastructure. Agentic ops, though, I think takes this to a whole other level, and where where the infrastructure, the only way I can think about it is that the infrastructure becomes more and more autonomous. It becomes more and more alive, and that it is looking at not just networking incidences, a link that goes down, a site that goes offline, and other kinds, or tromboning or flapping or any of those kind of networking behaviors that we experience from time to time. But also security instances, and kind of blends those two together in just overall performance, and is able to adapt and respond to that and fix that. So I don't, it's like, how far do you think we're away from kind of no human in the loop operations?
I mean, I think as far as no human in the loop goes, it's a question of trust. I mean, certainly the tools are capable today, and
Mm,
how much we want to lean into that, and how much leaning into that is right is
yeah.
also a thing. I'm not sure I want uh,
Mm,
all powerful agents having full control over my most critical network, but there's certain areas where it totally valid. I think there's kind of two pieces to this. One is having an agent. When I think of like a real agentic agent, I'm not talking about an agent that just responds to my requests.
right. Yeah.
It should be monitoring
Hmm.
active activity at all times, the way Ava does,
Yeah.
and being able to really sort of sense when problems are happening even before the first user is impacted, before the first problem happens. Like we all of the Arista infrastructure implements a state streaming strategy, state streaming system where every state change, every ARP table change, every routing table change is streamed directly into our NetDL, our data lake across the network. And Ava can just be monitoring that all the time for anything,
Mm,
any anomaly, anything that's wrong. The architecture that drives this, high fidelity data into the AI system is actually as big a differentiator as the agent itself. It's like you
yeah.
have to have the right data. The second piece would be the sort of integrations. Having the access to all of the tools within the networking system is great, but I saw a demo. Actually, I saw a demo on stage that Ken gave, where like there's just kind of enormous value to integrating across the tool chain that all of IT has. A ticket is opened in ServiceNow,
Oh, yeah.
and the agent is automatically is capable of assessing the ticket, noticing that it's network related, troubleshooting some of the problems, adding data to the ticket in terms of how what the result of that troubleshooting is, recommending a mitigation, potentially taking that action and putting the result back into the ticket, really closing the loop here. And to
Mm,
me, that's what it takes. It takes this integration with the broader IT system, not just looking pigeonholed into a single network interface or whatever.
yeah.
And it's amazing how powerful this stuff is. I mean, I
We should.
very few network engineers would be able to close the loop the way this thing did, and with the speed is unheard of, right?
I think that's the point, right? So it's I take to heart, your first point around trust. And that's why the podcast is named Built for Trust. It's like
Yeah. Oh,
you have to earn trust, in these systems have got to earn your trust,
it's
but
like a
more
new hire. I don't give a new hire the keys to the core network on their first day. Like, it's you learn to trust the agents over time, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. But I think, the second point that you were making is that, kind of concatenating to, is that the amount of data that we're seeing, and we're not just talking about kind of network traffic data, we're talking about kind of system data, like the logs, alerts, alarms, all the observability, data that we rely upon to check the health, of that infrastructure. That is growing exponentially, and so there's also a certain point, and I'm not sure where that is, because we have companies that have petabytes of data, a week that they're like consuming, but there's a certain point in time where like humans can't process any of this anymore, and that it's going to be machine, based. So I think, it's inevitable, where we're kind of going to go with no human in the loop. And it doesn't mean like L1, L2, L3 engineers won't be employed. It's not about that. They still will be. There's still a lot of value that they can offer, but maybe we just don't have to add that many more. To an operations. So maybe like as as AI really comes into these operations, and these kind of an agent mesh can kind of understand and is able to monitor and control that infrastructure. And then, maybe you're right. Maybe it's interacting with ServiceNow and creating tickets, but also adding value and color to those tickets, and helping in the remediation, of and getting to, the source of truth, or the root cause, of an outage. Once all of that starts to happen and you start to build trust in those processes, um, yeah, I think, it's we're gonna really, I think we have a path towards like kind of lights out operations where the infrastructure can actually manage itself.
There's a real opportunity for us to up level the kind of service that IT organizations around the world are delivering to the user.
Mm.
Um, Tickets, first of all, ticket avoidance, problems being resolved because agents are monitoring for any anomaly and making recommendations and taking action before the first user is impacted. Troubleshooting issues once users are impacted based on leading signals instead of waiting for a call, and then closing tickets as they come in, really autonomously. There's an enormous opportunity. We're network architects and designers, people who are building this technology out. We're there's I don't think any time when we're not going to have those folks, but the level of
Yeah.
service that we can kind of as an industry and in partnership with our customers, the level of service that we can give to the user, I think, is a real opportunity to shoot ahead here. Like in part that's why I think it's so exciting, such an exciting time for networking.
Oh,
So
for sure. So I just have one last question, because I know, actually we're coming down to time. So we've talked a lot about how AI is changing things, from infrastructure, traffic patterns, operations. Arista, your push into the campus, and overall enterprise fit. So, what's the kind of elevator pitch on the strategy? There is that was the campus play more for, okay, that whole, the campus needs a refresh, so let's participate in that refresh, or was it that there's a fundamentally new way in which we need to be building and managing infrastructure and providing networking, and so that's what we're going to go off and do.
I mean, I think there's basically one core um, strategy around Arista's drive into the campus, and it's been incredibly successful. We took our time getting into the campus.
Mm.
We've been here for 7 or 8 years now. It is a business that is growing, north of $1 billion run rate. It's growing 5 times faster than the market. It's a phenomenally successful portfolio, and I think it's all about this core strategy. Arista builds the most reliable, highest available, highest quality network in the world. Um, I think that's almost indisputable. The level of quality, availability, and reliability on Arista network is unmatched.
Mm.
Before 8 years ago, before even 5 years ago, there was tons of campus networks that we thought of as, important networks, but not mission critical. Mission critical networks, that was the sort of thing that like defense departments and, patient hospital networks were running.
Mm.
That's just no longer the case.
Mm.
Every campus network in every enterprise that I talk to, the teams consider mission critical now. Guest networks at hotels are like the number one cause of guest satisfaction. Hospital networks, patient networks, absolutely mission critical, life and death. Retailers can't take payments without their network up and running. Arista comes to a screeching halt if I have 5 minutes of Wi-Fi downtime. Every campus network is now mission critical, almost across the board. And if you're looking for the most reliable mission critical network technology in the world, that's coming from Arista. We've brought the reliability of the hyperscalers, of the mission critical data center into the campus. It's our core differentiator. And that's why it's, I think, so important that we continue to drive this journey into the campus at Arista. And I think it's why it's been so successful so far.
Yeah. Awesome. Todd, I think that's a great way to end.
Okay.
Hey,
yeah, Nick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I love it. I love your work. So thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time, Todd. And, it was actually really nice to get to know you, as well. So thanks so much.
That was so, that was so great. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay. You got to make sure you share this with your mom, though, because she'll probably get a good idea of what you do.
She's going to love it. She's going to love it. Yeah.
All right. Take care, Todd. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone, for plugging in.